Witnessing Enkinjiu's death with her own eyes, Si Xiaonan's face instantly turned pale. Her fists clenched tightly beyond her control. Enkinjiu was her comrade who fought alongside her at the toll station, defending Songnan years ago. Just recently he had said they might become close friends. Now he died right before her eyes at Loki's hands. An unprecedented wave of anger and unwillingness surged in Si Xiaonan's heart. What's wrong? It's just the death of a servant, are you that attached? Loki observed Si Xiaonan's expression, narrowing his eyes. Or perhaps, he wasn't actually your servant? Did he have another identity? Si Xiaonan's mind cleared slightly, a moment of clarity washing over her thoughts. He was still testing her. He discovered that Enkinjiu had no soul contract with her, so he became suspicious, personally eliminating the potential threat while using his death to test her. Damn it! Damn it! She clenched her teeth so hard that trickles of blood flowed between them. She pressed her lips tightly together, not letting a single drop of blood seep out. She stared at Enkinjiu's unblinking severed head, took a deep breath and slowly closed her eyes, completely concealing her emotional fluctuations. Even when a pet dog dies, its owner would feel something, let alone a living person, she said calmly. Hee, our little Nan is truly sentimental. Loki sneered. Si Xiaonan kept her head down, saying nothing. Killing this dog is just a warning. Don't make any foolish attempts. You're just a mortal, you can't outplay me. If this were 2 or 3 years ago, I would have killed you to eliminate any future trouble. But now I must admit, I've grown somewhat fond of you after all. Children who earn my appreciation are rare. Loki paused, then continued, but don't worry, that dog is dead, but Leng Xian is still alive. Hearing these words, a glimmer of light appeared in Si Xiaonan's eyes. I hid this avatar inside him just for contingencies. After I leave, he will regain consciousness. Of course, that's assuming I don't actively erase his consciousness. Loki spoke unhurriedly. What do you want me to do to spare his life? Si Xiaonan caught Loki's implied meaning and took the initiative to ask. I want that secret treasure from Kunlun Void. The treasure that allows gods to touch the supreme and mortals to instantly become gods. A gleam flashed in Loki's eyes. Help me get it, bring it back, and I'll spare Ling Xian's life. Si Xiaonan's heart tightened. So this was Loki's true objective all along. First deliver a blow, then offer some hope, then use it as leverage. What a skillful tactic. Ruthless and insidious. I understand, Si Xiaonan slowly replied. I will cooperate with you fully. Greatxia. Songnan City. In the underground cavity, a loud noise erupted as the wild-looking Enkinji suddenly sat up from the frost-covered box, gasping for breath. Loki. He muttered, quickly climbing out of the box, putting on his lab coat while dialing a number on his phone. Hello. This is Deputy Leader Enkinjiu of the Nightfall team. I have important information to report to the Commander-in-Chief's office. You're saying the god of mischief, Loki, has infiltrated Kunlun Void? At the Night Watcher's headquarters, Jiangxia looked at the solemn-faced Suiqing before him and asked in surprise. That's right, Suiqing replied gravely. This complicates matters. Jiangxia stroked his white beard while pondering. However, with that person there, nothing serious should happen. Suiqing, wearing a dark red cloak, paced around the office with a heavy expression, still shaking his head. No, I'm still concerned. This matter is too significant. We should err on the side of caution. When I first received the news, I already sent Lu Wuwei to the Pamir Plateau, but now it seems that might not be enough. I'll go personally. He extended his hand in a fist and palm salute to Jiangxia. Grandmaster, during my absence, I'll rely on you to oversee the Night Watchers. Go ahead. Jiangxia smiled slightly. Suiqing grabbed the straight sword from the table, fastened it to his waist, and his figure transformed into a streak of green light, disappearing into the horizon. Yaoqi. The dawn's faint light rose from the distant mountainside, spilling into the spacious courtyard. Yang Jian, sitting cross-legged on a rush mat, seemed to sense something and slowly opened his eyes, looking toward the statue-like figure in the distance. At the same time, a red light flew from the sky, transforming into a young man riding windfire wheels, landing beside Yang Jian. Nessa glanced at Lin Chia and asked in surprise. He's about to break through already? So fast. Hasn't it only been 9 hours? His body seems to have been cleansed by the power of faith, so it had few impurities to begin with. Naturally, he absorbs the peach's essence more quickly, Yang Jian answered. The power of faith. He's still a mortal, where would he get so much faith power? I don't know. The mysteries surrounding him seem to be more than we imagined. As the two conversed, the spiritual energy waves emanating from Lin Chia grew stronger, like successive giant waves, emitting deep tidal roars. The frequency of the wave impacts gradually accelerated, and the tidal sounds became more resonant and magnificent. Finally, dozens of tidal roars converged, like an erupting volcano, instantly sweeping across heaven and earth. Boom! With a tremendous sound, the courtyard beneath Lin Chia's feet instantly cracked with fine fissures, and a powerful, majestic spiritual energy surged from within him. His eyes slowly opened, gleaming with bright light. The Klein realm. Feeling the nearly endless spiritual power within his body, Lin Chia felt unprecedentedly powerful. Although he had previously entered the Klein realm through soul-bearing, the experience of relying on external forces was different from personally stepping into it. He exhaled deeply, feeling refreshed. Good progress. Yang Jian calmly remarked. Lin Chia smiled. Thank you for watching over me for so long. It was nothing. I say watching over, but with my illusory form, all I could do was provide early warning. Yang Jian shook his head. Looking at the sky, he continued. Now that your realm is sufficient while this time fragment still exists, let me teach you a few more things. Come before me. Hearing this, Lin Chia was slightly surprised and stepped in front of Yang Jian. Teach me something? What is it? Lin Chia asked curiously. Can I learn the divine abilities of gods? Some you cannot, but others you can, Yang Jian slowly replied. Have you ever heard of the law of heaven and earth transformation? Law of heaven and earth? Upon hearing these 4 words, Lin Chia was stunned for a moment, then his expression turned strange. If he wasn't mistaken, the equal to heaven manifestation he learned from Sun Wukong should be a form of the law of heaven and earth. I've heard of it. I've also learned a bit. Yang Jian quickly realized. That monkey taught you? Good. Show it to me. Lin Chia nodded, slowly closed his eyes, and after a moment, a soul shadow emerged from his body. The surrounding spiritual energy frantically stirred, pouring into this soul shadow. Several lightning bolts crossed the sky. Atop the floating mountain peak, demonic energy surged and a giant demon ape shadow quickly formed, landing on the mountainside. Demonic winds howled as Yang Jian and Neza stood in the courtyard, watching the giant demon slowly standing up on the mountainside, their eyebrows slightly raised. The aura is identical to that monkey's. It seems he received the true teachings, Neza remarked in surprise. Still claiming not to be that monkey's disciple? Without the monkey's personal instruction, how could he master this divine skill to such a degree? Yang Jian's silver robe fluttered in the rolling demonic energy. After carefully examining Demon Lin Chia for a long time, he nodded and said, Very good. Your demon manifestation has received that monkey's true teachings. Even throughout the entire heavenly court, few could achieve this level. However, the demon manifestation carries too much vicious energy. Using it long-term will affect your soul's character, making your emotions uncontrollable. Moreover, the demon manifestation's attack methods are limited to brute physical force. Though unparalleled in dominance, it becomes too clumsy in certain situations. The demon ape gazed at Yang Jian and nodded slightly. Regarding the 2 drawbacks Yang Jian mentioned, Lin Chia hadn't yet felt the first one affecting his character. Possibly because he had only used the equal to heaven manifestation once so far, so the influence wasn't obvious. But he had experienced the problem of limited attack methods when facing Klein and Mystery in Beijing. In the equal to heaven manifestation state, though his physical body was incomparably powerful, able to break the planchette with bare hands and crush the roly-poly with one bite, he was like a brute with only raw strength. If faced with several highly mobile mysteries, he would probably fly around aimlessly like a headless fly. The divine skill I'm teaching you today shares origins with the demon manifestation but is completely opposite. It can wash away the vicious energy effects from your demon manifestation and complement it. Since you've already learned the demon manifestation, learning this divine skill should be quick. Yang Jian stood before the rolling demonic energy, gently raised both hands, forming a complex hand seal in front of him. Simultaneously, the vertical eye on his forehead suddenly opened. A surging, immense divine power descended. The surrounding spiritual energy was instantly torn into a vortex, rapidly rotating above Yang Jian's head. His form rapidly grew taller, quickly transforming into a figure the same size as Demon Seven Knight. It was a majestic and solemn divine shadow, wearing silver armor, emanating dazzling divine light. The vertical eye on its forehead was slightly open, its gaze seemingly able to penetrate heaven and earth. A fierce demon and a solemn divine shadow stood opposing each other on the floating mountain peak shrouded in immortal mist. The divine shadow opened its lips and slowly spoke. This divine skill is my original divine manifestation. Pure origin manifestation. Yaoqi. Inside the most magnificent and towering immortal palace, a beautiful woman wearing a gold-threaded purple divine robe slowly walked through the white jade hall, stopping at the palace entrance. Her gaze penetrated the verdant peaks and white clouds, falling upon a certain mountain peak in Yaoqi, where a demon manifestation and a divine manifestation stood facing each other. The Queen Mother of the West's beautiful eyes moved, and a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Fate is wonderfully inexplicable. A yellow-dressed maid walked behind her, bowed respectfully and spoke gently. Your Majesty, we found a corpse at the foot of Qinghuan Peak, likely one of the 3 intruders who escaped. The Queen Mother narrowed her eyes slightly, shifting her gaze from the 2 manifestations, and pointed her fingertip in the void. The Kunlun mirror hanging at the top of the immortal palace suddenly trembled, rapidly shrinking to a palm-sized mirror, transforming into a stream of light that fell into the Queen Mother's hand. The Queen Mother held the Kunlun mirror and gently reflected it toward the Kunlun void before her. Her brows furrowed slightly. No trace of the other 2 rats. To escape the Kunlun mirror's reflection requires some skill. Your Majesty, what should we do next? The yellow-dressed maid asked worriedly. The Kunlun mirror can't find them, and only 1 day remains before Lord Tianzuan's deadline. The sword void. There's no time to waste on these 2 rats, the Queen Mother said calmly. The Queen Mother raised her hand, suspending the Kunlun mirror in mid-air. Her form flickered and a blurry afterimage walked out from her body, stepped into the Kunlun mirror's surface, and disappeared without a trace. She lightly tapped her finger and the Kunlun mirror automatically fell into the maid's hands. The time limit approaches. Today I must awaken the Kunlun sword void and cannot be distracted by external matters. From now on, you will hold the Kunlun mirror and manage Yaoqi's affairs on my behalf. I have left a strand of my divided soul in the Kunlun mirror. If crisis arises, I will intervene. The maid solemnly accepted the Kunlun mirror and bowed to the Queen Mother. Yes. The Queen Mother waved the sleeve of her divine robe, taking one last look at the mountain peak where the 2 manifestations stood, then her form transformed into a sky full of spiritual light, disappearing within the immortal palace. Outside Yaoqi, 2 figures wrapped in Yuan gauze flashed through the shadows at the foot of Yaoqi. The next moment, they leaped across hundreds of meters of airspace, silently passing through the deserted peach banquet venue like ghosts, stopping before the inner circle of Yaoqi. Loki's narrow eyes narrowed, gazing at the void before him as if observing something. He extended his fingertip, lightly tapping the space in front of him. An invisible ripple spread from the void, blocking his entry. The spiritual energy formation of the great Xia gods is still so troublesome, he said coldly. What should we do? Si Xiaonan, her form shrouded in shadows, asked. This formation may stop others, but it can't stop me, Loki said calmly. There's no place in this world I cannot infiltrate. A black light flashed in his eyes. The invisible ripple blocking him suddenly paused. He grabbed Si Xiaonan's arm and quickly passed through the ripple, standing inside the formation. After they passed through, the ripple continued to spread as if completely unaware that something had passed through, everything appearing normal. Seeing this, Si Xiaonan's eyes flashed with solemnity. As Loki's agent, she certainly understood his methods. He had used a trick to deceive the great formation of Yaoqi. This world, apart from Loki himself, Si Xiaonan is absolutely the person who understands him best. Loki's divine domain is the deceptive trickery, numbered 009 by the Night Watchers. Its sequence ranks quite high even among divine domains. This power can weave tricks capable of deceiving all things in the world. Whether people, gods, objects, or even established reality, all can be rewritten through these tricks. And this ability has only two flaws. First, the trick itself must possess logical consistency. Deceptive trickery can use tricks to overlay established facts with events that never happened, but the woven trick must be logically feasible. He can make a newly hatched hen turn into a rooster, but cannot make an egg hatch a piglet. Second, weaving tricks requires time. The time needed to weave a trick depends on the target being deceived. If it's just a trick to fool mortals, for Loki it's practically instantaneous. But if the object of deception is an established fact, then it depends on how long ago that fact occurred. From Si Xiaonan's observations over the past few years, Loki seems to be able to change events that happened within 15 seconds at most, and even such tricks require several seconds to weave. Si Xiaonan stood within the Great Formation, looking back at the ripples in the void, her eyes flickering with subtle light. She was calculating the time. From when Loki reached out to touch the formation until he passed through it, there was an interval of 3.46 seconds. And this was the time Loki needed to weave a trick that could deceive a god-level formation. Whether it would be useful in the future or not, Si Xiaonan firmly committed this data to memory. And like this data, she had already recorded dozens more. Loki's gaze swept over the many celestial palaces standing before him, and he spoke in a deep voice. Kunlun Void has too many divine temples. Searching them one by one would waste too much time. Before he finished speaking, he took Si Xiaonan with him, transforming into a streak of black light, flying rapidly toward the nearest celestial palace. At the entrance of that palace, dozens of celestial soldiers stood in long rows, carefully patrolling the surroundings. They hadn't noticed that two shadows had already silently appeared behind them. Since Loki didn't want to search each palace one by one, grabbing a small fry to ask for directions was naturally the most efficient approach. The celestial soldier at the very end, holding a long halberd, was marching forward with a solemn expression when a hand suddenly extended from the void behind him, silently reaching for his neck. But in the next moment, that hand passed through the celestial soldier's body as if through nothing. A soft exclamation came from the void. Loki looked at his empty palm, surprise appearing in his eyes. After hesitating for a moment, he reached out again, grabbing toward another celestial soldier. He still couldn't touch the soldier's body. Loki frowned slightly, lowering his head in thought. Beside him, Si Xiaonan saw this scene, her eyes also filled with confusion. These celestial soldiers were clearly standing right in front of them. Why couldn't they be touched? Loki narrowed his eyes, bent down to pick up a small stone from the ground, and pinched it between his fingers to examine it carefully. A few seconds later, he seemed to realize something and laughed coldly. I wondered why the divine power here was so dense. So that's it, relying on a fragment of time imagery to nearly deceive all divine countries. This must be the deceiving heaven by crossing the sea strategy in Great Xia's plan. Time imagery? Si Xiaonan looked around. Everything you saw at the peach banquet and everything presented before us now are all just images from a certain period in Kunlun Void's past. It's a false appearance deliberately shown to you proxies. I felt something was off earlier. Kunlun Void of Great Xia has always been extremely mysterious, so why would they suddenly reveal a glimpse of heavenly secrets at this critical moment, exposing their location? Great Xia did this to lure in proxies like you who are trying to explore the bottom of Great Xia's divinity, and then use this time imagery to convey a false impression to all other divine countries. The false impression that the Great Xia gods are still stationed in Great Xia and at full strength. From the beginning, Kunlun Void was a trap prepared for the 4 great divine countries. Loki paused, then continued, but if they're not in Great Xia, where exactly did they go? If I were them. Loki seemed to have some kind of guess, his eyes flickering with light. Hearing these words, Si Xiaonan's heart immediately sank. Things were truly as Loki said, and Great Xia did this to use proxies like them to transmit false information to other divine countries. Then Loki, this infiltrating god of trickery, became the variable in everything. He had seen through the Great Xia god's arrangement, which put Great Xia in a dangerous position. Just as Si Xiaonan was worrying, Loki raised his head, his whole person seeming quite pleased, the corners of his mouth turning up slightly. Interesting. Then, as if sensing something, he turned to look into the distance. A green shadow flashed across the sky above them, flying straight toward the central celestial palace. Si Xiaonan looked carefully and discovered it was a maid wearing a green dress. Loki stared at the green-dressed maid for a moment, a strand of hair at his temple gently fluttering in the breeze. He raised an eyebrow. Not an illusion? Without any hesitation he reached out and grabbed at the maid in midair. The green-dressed maid's pupils contracted sharply, and in the next moment she fell from the sky. A hand immediately gripped her neck, and in a dizzying moment she was pinned against a wall in a corner of the celestial palace. The green-dressed maid groaned, trickles of blood seeping from the corners of her mouth, her face extremely pale. Seeing this, Si Xiaonan's eyes flashed with a trace of conflict, but she still waved her hand, and an invisible gauze completely covered the corner of the celestial palace. Black light flashed on the gauze and a trick was immediately attached to it. Causeless gauze was already the strongest forbidden domain for concealing aura. Years ago, Si Xiaonan could use it to block the leakage of Shiva's resentment's aura. Now with the addition of a trick that deceived all beings, even gods short of the supreme ones, could not detect their presence. The green-dressed maid opened her eyes in pain, and before her was a pair of cold, snake-like narrow eyes. I hear your Kunlun void has a secret treasure? Loki pinned the maid against the wall with one hand, holding her in midair, and spoke calmly. Where is it? The green-dressed maid bit her lips tightly, glaring at Loki, not saying a word. Never mind. Loki shrugged. Let me try another way to ask. As he spoke, Cold Xian's snake-scale-covered right arm twisted strangely, and a small black snake head broke through his palm, violently drilling into the maid's right ear, directly churning into her brain. Screams echoed through the empty celestial palace. Not good. In the highest celestial palace, the yellow-robed maid seemed to sense something, her heart skipping a beat. She suddenly looked toward a certain area of Yaopool, her beautiful eyes filled with unprecedented anger. Her entire body transformed into a beam of yellow light, soaring upward. At the same time, throughout Yaopool, 4 different colored rainbow lights rose up and flew toward a certain celestial palace. In a corner of the celestial palace, thud. A dull sound echoed through the empty hall as a black snake covered in blood crawled out from the bleeding orifices of the maid's head and returned into Loki's right arm. Loki stood there with his eyes closed as if listening to something. Moments later he opened his eyes, looked toward a certain area of Yaopool, his face showing desire. Yaopool's secret treasure, the immortality pill. Si Xiaonan silently looked at the dying green-robed maid at her feet and closed her eyes helplessly. I found the location of Yaopool's secret treasure. Loki licked his lips. Unfortunately, her soul was too weak and could only endure Jormungandr's torture for such a short time. Otherwise we might have learned about the great Xia god's whereabouts. Though that's not so important to me anyway. Loki casually waved his hand. Xiaonan, kill her and let's go get the treasure. A faint light flashed in Si Xiaonan's eyes. She made a sound of acknowledgement, walked to the green-robed maid and touched her chest with a fingertip. The maid's heartbeat suddenly stopped. The green-robed maid's body shuddered, completely losing all signs of life. In the next moment the two of them, wearing the Wuan gauze, quickly rushed out of the celestial palace and disappeared without a trace. Just seconds after they left, 5 streams of light rushed into the celestial palace one after another. The yellow-robed maid at the front was holding a bronze mirror. When she saw the green-robed maid lying in a pool of blood without breathing, her pupils contracted sharply. They landed beside the green-robed maid, their faces extremely grim. Those 2 intruders dare to return to Yaopool? The red-robed maid scanned the surroundings with angry eyes. Where are they? I don't know, the Kunlun mirror can't locate them. Before the yellow-robed maid could finish speaking, the green-robed maid lying in the pool of blood, who had already lost her life, suddenly opened her eyes, her chest heaving violently. Her heartbeat returned. Seeing the yellow-robed maid come back to life, the 5 maids standing nearby were all stunned, then their faces showed wild joy. Although the green-robed maid had regained her heartbeat, her soul was still severely damaged. She lay there in pain, using her last strength to murmur. Dan Palace. Their target is Dan Palace. After saying the last word, the green-robed maid's head drooped and she completely passed out. Hearing the words Dan Palace, the 5 maids' eyes narrowed. They exchanged glances, their faces showing solemn expressions. After confirming that the green-robed maid was not in immediate danger, the 5 immediately transformed into streams of light and flew out of the celestial palace, carrying terrible killing intent, heading straight toward Dan Palace. On the peak of the guest mountain in Yaopool, as the surging spiritual energy gradually subsided, a blurry soul slowly descended to the ground, its form wavering before crashing into the body of Lin Chia, whose eyes were tightly closed. As his soul returned, Lin Chia, sitting on the ground, opened his eyes and let out a long breath. "You've mastered it well." Standing not far away, Yang Jian nodded slightly. "With a few more practice sessions, you'll be able to adapt based on my divine form and develop your own divine form." Lin Chia smiled. "Thank you." Just as Lin Chia finished speaking, 5 streams of light filled with killing intent soared from the distant celestial palace, passing over the mountain peak where they were and flying into the distance. Seeing this, both Lin Chia and Yang Jian frowned simultaneously. "What's going on?" Neza asked puzzledly from the side. "Why are these maids releasing such strong killing intent within Yaopool? Isn't the queen managing this?" Lin Chia frowned as he watched the direction where the 5 streams of light had disappeared. Something isn't right. If he wasn't mistaken, those streams of light should be the personal maids who attended to the Queen Mother of the West. They had physical forms. The current Yaopool was merely a time fragment. In this illusory world, what could make them release such powerful killing intent? Lin Chia recalled Andre, who had acted in Yaopool, and his heart sank. Could it be that other outer god agents had infiltrated? "I'll follow them and see," Lin Chia said without hesitation. Yang Jian stared at the direction where the 5 maids had gone, looked down at his own illusory hands and closed his eyes resignedly. "Be careful." A rich fragrance of elixirs wafted out from behind the Vermilion Palace doors. 2 figures stood on the steps in front of the Celestial Palace, looking up at the plaque above. "Dan Palace. This is it." Loki waved his hand lightly and the tightly closed palace doors slowly opened with a dull creaking sound. The ancient wood fragrance that had been sealed for ages mixed with medicinal aromas, flooding into their nostrils like a tide, sometimes bitter, sometimes sweet, sometimes salty. Amidst the flying dust, Si Xiaonan stood behind Loki, slightly turning her head to look into the distance, her face somewhat pale. The trick she had left on the green-robed maid had consumed a large amount of her mental energy. This trick had briefly deceived the green-robed maid's body, making it believe it had died and thus completely losing its vitality. It was precisely with this trick that she had been able to pull the green-robed maid back from the abyss of death right under Loki's nose. Si Xiaonan wasn't worried that Loki would check the maid's body again, because he no longer had the mind for it. Now, all his attention was on Yaopool's secret treasure. She wondered if the contingency she had left behind could create some obstacles for Loki. While Si Xiaonan was secretly worrying, Loki had already stepped into Dan Palace. With a snap of his fingers, dozens of pale green flames lit up in the dim hall. In the light of these flames, silver elixir vessels floating in the air appeared. The rich fragrance of elixirs in the air was drifting out from these vessels. On each vessel hung a wooden tag inscribed with its name. "Return to Heaven Pill, Heart-Rotting Pill, Celestial Dust Pill." Si Xiaonan's gaze swept across these elixir vessels one by one. By the time she came back to her senses, Loki had already traversed more than half of Dan Palace. Wearing a black robe, Loki's gaze didn't linger on any of these elixir vessels for even a moment. His eyes were passionately fixed on the end of Dan Palace, as if the surrounding elixir vessels didn't exist at all. Si Xiaonan stepped forward to follow closely behind her. Just then, a booming sound came from the entrance of Dan Palace. 5 streams of light carrying cold killing intent charged directly toward Loki, who was walking at the front. A figure wearing a deep red cloak stood quietly at the entrance, carrying a sword case on his back. His gaze swept over the handmaidens lying in pools of blood throughout the hall, finally settling on Si Xiaonan, who held the broken sword, his eyes narrowing. At the moment they rushed through the palace doors, Loki paused. He turned his head, his narrow eyes coldly glancing at the 5 handmaidens, a hint of mockery flashing in his gaze. "You think you can stop me without a single Daxia god present?" Before the 5 handmaidens could reach him, Loki stomped his right foot forcefully on the ground. A surging divine pressure swept out violently, forcibly knocking the 5 airborne handmaidens back several meters, causing them to stagger as they landed. Foreign god. The yellow-dressed handmaiden sensed the divine pressure emanating from Loki, her pupils suddenly contracting. They had assumed that only proxy agents of foreign gods who hadn't reached divine status had infiltrated Kunlun Void, never expecting to encounter a true deity here. How did he get in? Form the array. The yellow-dressed handmaiden reacted extremely quickly. All 5 handmaidens simultaneously flipped their palms, and 5 distinctively shaped swords appeared in their hands out of thin air. They held the swords in their right hands while forming seals with their left. The 5 swords flew from their hands, following some mysterious trajectory in the air. Points of starlight illuminated the ceiling of the elixir hall, weaving together to form a sword array that enveloped Loki's body. Si Xiaonan sighed deeply in her heart. The aura emanating from this sword array was powerful, sufficient to kill someone at the peak of the Klein realm, but still far from enough to harm Loki, even though what stood here was merely one of his avatars. Loki calmly glanced at the star sword array above his head, showing no intention of avoiding it, allowing the starlight to completely cover his form. Just as the 5 handmaidens were about to breathe a sigh of relief, something unexpected happened. Loki raised both hands and casually clapped them in front of his chest. With the crisp sound of his palms meeting, his form flickered to where the 5 handmaidens stood, while the 5 handmaidens only felt a blur before finding themselves in the center of the starlight array. The pupils of the 5 handmaidens suddenly contracted. Outside the array, Loki gently tapped his knuckle against the surface of the starlight sword array. The endless starlight violently shattered, transforming into sharp sword fragments that swept back into the array, cutting ghastly wounds across the bodies of the 5 handmaidens. In an instant the sword array collapsed and the 5 women were severely injured. The yellow-dressed handmaiden knelt in a pool of blood, gritting her teeth as she watched the smiling Loki approach, the killing intent in her eyes not diminishing in the slightest. "You're not afraid of me?" Loki stopped in front of her and calmly asked. "Why should I fear you?" The yellow-dressed handmaiden let out a cold laugh. "You can't hurt me." "Is that so?" Loki narrowed his eyes and raised his hand to strike her head, but as his palm descended, a brilliant divine light burst from within the handmaiden's body. Loki frowned slightly and instantly retreated nearly 100 meters. A bronze mirror flew out from the yellow-dressed handmaiden's body, hanging high in the air. Its amber surface clearly reflected everything in the hall, with terrifying waves of divine power howling forth from within the mirror. In the mirror's reflection, a blurry figure of light stepped forward, passing directly through the mirror's surface to become a beautiful matron wearing a gold-threaded purple robe and a phoenix-winged golden crown. She walked on thin air, looking down at Loki in the great hall below, her beautiful eyes showing neither joy nor anger, only endless majesty radiating outward. Upon seeing this beautiful matron, Loki's previously casual expression immediately grew solemn. "Western miscreant, you dare to cause trouble in my Yaoqi?" The Queen Mother of the West spoke calmly, her boundless divine authority surging forth. A fair jade hand emerged from the sleeve of her golden divine robe, pressing down lightly toward Loki's head. Above the great hall, a massive spiritual energy vortex rapidly formed. The spiritual energy of the entire Yaoqi seemed to boil, churning frantically as a hand large enough to blot out the sky and cover the sun condensed from the void. Loki's expression grew increasingly grim. He glanced at Si Xiaonan at the hall entrance, then returned his gaze to the Queen Mother of the West, coldly smiling as he said, "We are both avatars, why should I fear you? Do you believe that if you let me leave here today, tomorrow the 4 divine nations will join forces to breach Daxia's borders and exterminate all your Daxia gods?" As his words fell, Loki laughed loudly, his form transforming into a black lightning bolt that instantly shot out through the elixir hall's doors, rushing toward the sky above Kunlun Void. The Queen Mother of the West's expression slightly darkened. Holding the Kunlun mirror, she took a step that shattered space and closely pursued Loki. The next moment, thunderous explosions came from above as the 2 divine avatars fiercely battled in the sky above Yaoqi, causing the entire Yaoqi to tremble slightly. Dust trickled down from the ceiling of the elixir hall, and pale green flames burned in midair, making Si Xiaonan's shadow dance like a demon. She stood in place, recalling the look Loki had just given her, her fists involuntarily clenching tight. "Help me find it, bring it back, and I will spare Cold Xian's life." Loki's words echoed in her ears. That look was both a reminder and a threat. From the beginning, Loki knew clearly that as a Daxia stronghold, Kunlun Void would certainly have some kind of contingency even if all the Daxia gods were away. Otherwise, the Daxia gods would never have been so bold as to reveal its location. He brought Si Xiaonan precisely to deal with this kind of situation. Had he calculated this step from the start? Countless thoughts flashed through Si Xiaonan's mind. After a moment, determination appeared in her eyes. She stepped through the spacious elixir halls, heading straight toward the depths. After walking a few steps, several figures stood before her, staggering with broken swords in hand. The blood-covered yellow-dressed handmaiden coldly looked at Si Xiaonan, raising her broken sword to point at her nose. You are also from Daxia. Why do you stand with the Western gods against your own people? Si Xiaonan looked into her eyes but did not answer her question, only calmly shaking her head. Put it down. In your current state you cannot stop me. Dong. A thunderous sound echoed across Yaopool. Loki's figure crashed down like a meteorite, instantly piercing through several floating mountain peaks before landing on the ground below. Loki stood up from the billowing smoke, coughing violently, with large amounts of blood splattering on the ground. Even with Jormungandr's parasitic presence, this mortal body's physical condition is too poor. Loki wiped away the blood as dark energy surged from within his body, seemingly weaving something. 5 seconds later his body vanished from the deep crater, then reappeared standing in the sky above Yaopool. The wounds and bloodstains on his body had completely disappeared, as if he had never been seriously injured. He had woven a trick, deceiving established facts and making the world believe that he had dodged the Queen Mother of the West's terrifying attack seconds ago, causing reality to change accordingly, naturally leaving no scars on his body. Loki's figure appeared ghost-like beside the Queen Mother of the West. His form flickered and 6 identical Lokis walked out from his body. The snake-scaled palms of these Lokis split open, black trickster snakes emerged from within, striking at the Queen Mother's body like lightning, completely blocking all her escape routes. Seeing Loki return before her unharmed and splitting into 7, the Queen Mother of the West, holding the Kunlun mirror, narrowed her eyes as spiritual energy surged around her once more. She raised the Kunlun mirror in her palm, and its surface instantly swept across the surroundings. In the reflection of the Kunlun mirror, the area around the Queen Mother was completely empty. None of the 7 trickster gods was the real body. A petty trick. The Queen Mother spoke calmly, flipping the mirror surface to face herself. In the bronze mirror's reflection, a figure like a hissing black snake was tightly pressed against the Queen Mother's back, with a small snake already climbing up her neck, about to bite down in the next moment. Seeing his image discovered by the Kunlun mirror, Loki's eyes narrowed. The power of time surged from the mirror's surface, and terrifying pressure swept in from all directions. Loki's movements suddenly slowed, like a fish living in a cement ocean, his form about to solidify with the surrounding space. The Queen Mother of the West held the Kunlun mirror in her right hand and extended her left hand, expressionlessly pressing lightly against Loki's chest, which had been frozen by the Kunlun mirror. Loki's chest instantly collapsed and he was once again blasted from the sky, crashing heavily onto the Kunlun virtual mountain range outside Yaopool. Along with the muffled roar of the collapsing mountain, there came a series of crisp metallic clangs. Loki lay on his back in the center of the collapsed mountain. The time silhouette around him had been shattered at one corner, and several grim sword edges pierced through his body from the ground, pinning him firmly to the mountain range. Loki violently spat out a mouthful of blood. He stiffly turned his head to look at the sword edges penetrating his body, confusion appearing in his eyes. Swords? Where did these swords come from on this mountain? He looked around. The time silhouette of Kunlun Virtual had broken at one corner due to his battle with the Queen Mother. The mountain range's virtual image, once filled with birdsong and fragrant flowers, now revealed its true appearance. On the grayish-white mountain surface, there were no more lush green trees or red flowers. Numerous rocks were exposed on the surface, and countless ancient swords emitting a grim cold light were thrust into the mountain, seemingly endless, covering the entire peak and extending to another green mountain shrouded in the time silhouette. The phantom of a crane flew from another mountain peak, gliding elegantly over the grayish-white mountain surface, its form passing through one ancient sword after another like a phantom as if they weren't there. The crane was fake, but this sword mountain was real. Loki had no time to think further. Black light burst from his body again, instantly weaving another trick. After escaping all his injuries, his form returned to the sky once more. He stood under the blue sky, gazing at that sword mountain from afar. Although the sword mountain was as tiny as a grain of sand among the vast Kunlun virtual mountain range, for some reason, Loki's heart began to feel uneasy. Under the time silhouette of that mountain peak lay a sword mountain. What about beneath the virtual images of the other mountain ranges? Why were there so many swords hidden in Kunlun virtual? What was the great Xia god planning to do? Loki frowned deeply, looking toward the elixir palace of Yaopool in the distance. His gaze seemed to penetrate space, landing directly on Si Xiaonan inside the palace. After this brief exchange, Loki clearly recognized that he was no match for the Queen Mother's avatar wielding the Kunlun mirror. If this continued, his divine power in this avatar would be exhausted, and the Queen Mother would eventually kill his avatar and then crush Si Xiaonan with one blow. Although sacrificing Leng Xian and Si Xiaonan meant nothing to Loki, this was his only chance to obtain the Kunlun treasure. If he missed it, his possibility of becoming a supreme god would grow increasingly slim. While he was keeping the Queen Mother's avatar occupied, Si Xiaonan had to obtain the Kunlun treasure and leave this place. But at that moment, another figure suddenly entering the elixir palace caught his attention. His pupils contracted sharply. His mind recalled the youth from Tsangnan City years ago, who carried the power of miracles and personally slew one of his avatars. It's him. A dangerous light flickered in Loki's eyes. Yaopool. Elixir Palace. Lin Chia stared at the familiar yet strange face of the young woman under the pale green firelight. After a long while he finally came to his senses. Xiaonan. Si Xiaonan, seeing Lin Chia at the door, was equally stunned. He knew Lin Chia was in Kunlun Virtual, but never imagined they would meet here. Xiaonan. Lin Chia seemed to remember something, his expression becoming grave. You. After the Tsangnan catastrophe ended, Lin Chia went mad. By the time he regained clarity, he was already in the mental hospital of the Abstinence Institute. He only learned later that Si Xiaonan was the agent of the god of mischief, had betrayed the Night Watchers during the Tsangnan catastrophe, and had left Great Xia with Leng Xian. However, during the human circle, Wu Xiangnan told him that the Shiva's grudge that Si Xiaonan took away was actually fake. All the survivors of Squad 136 always believed that Si Xiaonan hadn't betrayed them. She had just temporarily left. Lin Chia believed this too. But when he saw Si Xiaonan entering the elixir palace with a broken sword, and the 5 Yaopool handmaidens lying in pools of blood nearby, his heart tightened slightly. A certain thought surfaced in his mind, only to be immediately rejected. Impossible. The Si Xiaonan he knew would never do such a thing. He looked at the blood-stained Si Xiaonan before him with a complicated expression, took a deep breath and slowly asked, Xiaonan, what exactly happened here? Hearing these words, Si Xiaonan's body trembled slightly. She looked at Lin Chia's sincere eyes and a warmth rose in her heart. The first thing Lin Chia said when he saw her was, what exactly happened here? Rather than what have you done? This meant that deep down he didn't believe she was responsible for these things. He trusted her. Si Xiaonan's lips pressed together slightly. Just as she was about to say something, a voice floated to her ears. First steal the Kunlun treasure, and if there's a chance, kill that young man. Si Xiaonan's heart immediately sank. Loki could see this place. In a flash, countless thoughts crossed Si Xiaonan's mind as she quickly assessed the current situation. She didn't answer, only giving Lin Chia a complex look before turning around with her sword and rushing toward the 2 medicine jars in the depths of the Dan Palace. Loki was nearby, and now was not the time to reminisce with Lin Chia. Some things absolutely could not be said at this moment. Loki wanted her to kill Lin Chia, so she had to fight him. If Lin Chia knew the whole truth and chose not to stop her, or even actively helped her, then in the eyes of Loki, the suspicious god of mischief, her identity as a traitor would be confirmed. This way, whether she could bring back the Kunlun treasure or not, both she and Cold Xian would be doomed. Loki would never allow 2 traitors to live in this world. Moreover, with Loki's power, he couldn't hold off the Queen Mother of the West's avatar for too long. Once Loki retreated, she would have no chance of taking the Kunlun treasure from under the Queen Mother's nose. If she couldn't bring back the Kunlun treasure, she would lose her value to Loki, and rather than let Si Xiaonan and Cold Xian fall into the hands of the great Xia gods, he would definitely use the soul contract to eliminate them first. She had to leave with the Kunlun treasure before Loki completely failed. Only then could she and Cold Xian survive. Of course, what exactly the so-called Kunlun treasure was would be up to her to decide. A gleam flashed in Si Xiaonan's eyes. Seeing that Si Xiaonan didn't answer but instead turned to rush toward the 2 medicine jars in the depths of the Dan Palace, Lin Qia's heart skipped a beat. He had to admit that at this moment his trust in Si Xiaonan wavered. Just as Lin Qia was hesitating whether to move against Si Xiaonan, the unconscious maid in the yellow dress struggled to open her eyes. Seeing Lin Qia standing at the entrance of the hall, she grabbed at this lifeline and shouted, "Immortal Lin! Don't let her take the immortality pill. It's a great Xia treasure that absolutely cannot fall into the hands of foreign gods." Hearing these words, Lin Qia's mind shook. He gritted his teeth and his form transformed into a shadow of night, disappearing from where he stood. Night flicker. Whether he believed Si Xiaonan or not, since this was a great Xia treasure, he absolutely could not allow Si Xiaonan to take it. In the depths of the Dan Palace, Si Xiaonan's form moved like a beam of light, flying directly toward the black and white medicine jars suspended in the air. She reached out her hand, hesitation flashing in her eyes. Which of these 2 jars contain the immortality pill? Forget it, she would take them both. Just as Si Xiaonan's fingertips were about to touch the black jar, a sharp blade light slashed out from nothingness, precisely targeting her outstretched hand. Her eyes narrowed as she quickly withdrew her hand and stepped back. The blade light returned to its sheath, and a figure wearing a deep red cloak emerged from the night. "Xiaonan, you cannot take this," Lin Qia said with a frown, his right hand gripping the hilt of white slash. Si Xiaonan looked into Lin Qia's eyes, bit her lip, and a black light flashed from her palm. The next moment her form transformed into a raven, flapping its wings and flying toward the main door of the Dan Palace. A black feather floated in front of Lin Qia. As he frowned, watching the raven fly out of the hall, he suddenly realized something and turned sharply to look behind him. Somehow, Si Xiaonan had already appeared next to the black medicine jar, grabbing it firmly, and was now rapidly flying toward the white jar. A visual trick? Lin Qia thought of the black raven that had just flown out of the hall and his heart sank. He had almost forgotten that Si Xiaonan was the proxy of the god of mischief. Without any hesitation, Lin Qia again drew white slash from his waist, but this time he didn't slash at Si Xiaonan's hand. Instead, he used the blade light to ignore space itself, tapping the bottom of the white jar. Ding! With a crisp sound, the white medicine jar was flicked upward by the blade light, flying rapidly into the sky. Si Xiaonan's hand grasped at empty air. She was momentarily stunned, then looked up at the spinning jar in the sky and launched herself upward. But before she could fly very high, a huge white bear emerged from nothingness, its powerful body crashing directly into Si Xiaonan. Its arms wrapped around her, firmly restraining her. Si Xiaonan hadn't expected a white bear to jump out of the void. Caught off guard, she was grabbed by the void white bear and fell toward the ground. She stared at the spinning white jar in the sky as streams of black light poured from her body, rapidly weaving a trick. At that moment, a deep red figure flew up into the sky and steadily caught the falling white jar. Was this the Kunlun treasure? Lin Qia held the white jar and shook it gently, suddenly freezing in place. He looked down at the jar in his hand in astonishment, opened the lid, and discovered that the jar was completely empty without a single pill inside. This jar was empty? Lin Qia's gaze moved along the jar's body, finally stopping at the bottom, his eyes narrowing slightly. At the bottom of the white jar, 3 ancient characters were engraved in cinnabar. Immortality pill. At the same time, the black light surrounding Si Xiaonan, who was being held by the void white bear and about to crash to the ground, finally completed its weaving. Boom! With a tremendous sound, the void white bear's form crashed to the ground, cracking the floor of the Dan Palace with fine fissures. Dust billowed up, but Si Xiaonan was nowhere to be seen. The next moment, Si Xiaonan stood in midair, dressed in black. Her left hand held a black medicine jar, and her right hand held the white one. Lin Qia's eyes narrowed and he looked down at his own palm again. Somehow the white jar he had caught had been transferred to Si Xiaonan's hand. A trick that altered reality? Lin Chia's brows furrowed tightly. The trick Si Xiaonan had just woven directly changed established facts. In the new history she hadn't been tackled by the void white bear and hadn't fallen, so she naturally got to the white jar before Lin Chia. The moment Si Xiaonan grasped the white jar she was also startled. Empty. She noticed the weight difference between the black and white jars. The black jar was obviously heavier than the white one, and when shaken she could hear a pill rolling around inside. She lifted the bottom of the black jar, where 3 large characters were similarly engraved in cinnabar. Eternal life pill. Immortal elixir. Is it 2 pills? Si Xiaonan recalled Loki's description of the Kunlun treasure, and realized he had never actually specified what this pill was, nor mentioned how many there were, only saying that the immortal elixir needed to be brought back to Asgard. But if the immortal elixir among the Kunlun treasures consisted of both the immortality pill and the eternity pill, and the immortality pill was still in the container, then where did the eternity pill go? Si Xiaonan looked up at Lin Chia. Don't look at me, it was already empty when I got it. Lin Chia shook his head and said. Si Xiaonan was stunned and a bold idea flashed through her mind. The eternity pill container was empty, so perhaps. A gleam flashed in Si Xiaonan's eyes. Holding both pill containers she instantly flew out of the pill hall, with Lin Chia transforming into a shadow of night closely following behind. 2 streaks of light rapidly weaved through the thousands of pill containers floating in the pill hall. Xiaonan, leave the immortality pill behind, Lin Chia said in a low voice. Sorry. Si Xiaonan showed no intention of stopping, her speed increasing as she turned and passed through half the pill hall, with the wide entrance appearing before her eyes. Lin Chia frowned. Then don't blame me for being too harsh. Lin Chia took a step forward, brilliant magical light blooming beneath his feet. The strange liquid formed by his black pupils instantly attached to his physical body, beginning to control it. At the same time, a soul shadow flew out from Lin Chia's body, and the surrounding spiritual energy immediately surged toward him. The soul form of Lin Chia made hand seals, deploying mysterious Taoist techniques. A crack faintly appeared at the center of his soul's forehead. As this crack appeared, the churning spiritual energy around rapidly poured into Lin Chia's soul through the crack. His form began to expand rapidly like an inflating balloon. A pale blue eye slowly opened at the center of the soul form's forehead. Si Xiaonan, who was already approaching the hall's entrance, sensed the terrifying aura from behind and her expression immediately became grave. She looked back to see a blue giant shadow that had already broken through the top of the pill hall and was still rapidly growing taller. Dust and debris fell from the sky, obscuring her vision. What is that thing? She muttered. Boom. A sharp blue trident suddenly stabbed into the ground in front of Si Xiaonan. Si Xiaonan's movement abruptly halted. Before her, a divine shadow that blotted out the sky, wearing silver robes and armor, gripped this trident with both hands, standing like a mountain guarding the entrance of the pill hall. Fierce winds surged from beneath this mountain-like divine shadow. On its blurry face, a vertical eye had opened, its gaze carrying endless majesty, coldly staring down at Si Xiaonan. This was another divine transformation technique Yang Jian had taught Lin Chia, the Qingyuan divine form. The trident that pierced the ground in front of Si Xiaonan cut through the floor of the pill hall, and amid flying stone fragments, swiftly slashed toward Si Xiaonan. Si Xiaonan's expression tightened. She extended her right hand, joining her index and middle fingers as black light intertwined at her fingertips, rapidly condensing into a strange seal. She raised her fingers and pointed toward the sky. Celestial phenomenon trickery. Crack. A black lightning bolt like a writhing giant snake struck down from the clear sky, precisely hitting the blade of the trident, shattering part of the weapon formed from spiritual energy. She grabbed both pill containers and quickly slipped through the gap in the blade, darting toward the outside of the pill hall. But before her feet could step outside the hall entrance, a gaze fell upon her. The invisible force of that gaze bound her body, as if a giant hand firmly gripped her, lifting her directly from the ground to hover in midair. Si Xiaonan suddenly raised her head and saw that at the center of the divine shadow's forehead, a vertical eye was emitting a faint blue light. As that vertical eye focused its gaze, Si Xiaonan felt an invisible hand slam heavily into her chest, sending her crashing back into the pill hall like a meteorite, knocking dozens of pill containers from the air as dust billowed out. Si Xiaonan groaned, staggering to her feet from the deep crater. Just as a wisp of black light appeared in her palm, a deep red figure mysteriously appeared behind her. It seems that weaving trickery to alter reality also requires time. Lin Jie, controlled by the black pupil, spoke calmly. As long as I don't give you time, you can't erase your injuries, nor can you change history. The moment she heard these words, Si Xiaonan's eyes narrowed slightly. A short dagger fell from her sleeve into her palm, and she twisted her body to slash at Lin Jie. The crimson eye at Lin Jie's forehead seemed to perceive Si Xiaonan's movement trajectory in advance. He raised his hand to block her wrist that held the dagger, while his other hand formed a fist and heavily struck Si Xiaonan's chest. Lin Jie, whose body had been tempered by the power of faith and who had eaten a peach of immortality, possessed physical strength far beyond what Si Xiaonan could match. This single punch sent her flying hundreds of meters, crashing through countless pill containers with a series of clangs before smashing into a wall, creating spider web-like cracks. Si Xiaonan lay in the billowing dust, gasping for breath, her face extremely pale. Though severely injured, her expression showed no panic. Her gaze quickly scanned the surroundings as if searching for something. Finally, her gaze fell upon a dark green pill container by her feet, and a gleam flashed almost imperceptibly in her eyes. Finally found it. She grasped the empty white container with her left hand and staggered to her feet. Using the swirling dust as cover, she seemingly accidentally knocked the white container against the dark green one, as a flash of black light passed between her palms. Gulp. With a subtle sound, a pill mysteriously transferred from the dark green container into the empty white one. At the bottom of that dark green container, another pill's name was inscribed in cinnabar. Soul-consuming poison pill. Si Xiaonan held the black and white containers, slowly standing upright, wiping the blood from the corner of her mouth with her wrist. Outside the pill hall, the towering Qingyuan divine form gradually dissipated. A soul shadow returned to its physical body, and Lin Jie opened his eyes, holding Hun Bai, calmly walking toward the severely injured Si Xiaonan. Xiaonan, put down the immortality pill. Lin Jie, you can't stop me. Si Xiaonan looked into his eyes, a deep meaning flashing in her gaze. The green lycoris will eventually bloom, and even winter cannot bury it. Green lycoris? Hearing these words, Lin Jie froze in place. In his mind, he once again saw the scene of Squad 136 laughing and chatting during their team-building event before the Tsongnan disaster. Hey, what flower is this? I've never seen it before. This is Manjasaka, also known as lycoris. Isn't lycoris red? But this one is green. Who says lycoris can't be green? Lycoris comes in many colors. For example, red lycoris symbolizes longing, blue is. What about green? Green. Wu Xiangnan thought for a moment. Its meaning should be everlasting hope. Why did she say this? Lin Jie looked into Si Xiaonan's eyes as if remembering something. Xiaonan. Before he could finish, Si Xiaonan flashed past him, and as her figure swept by his side, a whisper drifted into his ear. Let me go. Lin Jie's body trembled. Before he could do anything, Si Xiaonan's palm pressed against his shoulder, a black light flashing between her fingers. Lin Jie felt the world spinning as he was sent flying backward, crashing through a wall of the Elixir Palace and embedding deep into the ground. Si Xiaonan seized the opportunity to flee, her form flickering as she created 3 shadow clones, each rushing in different directions. Lin Jie coughed as he stood up from the deep crater, his eyes scanning the 4 figures of Si Xiaonan flying in different directions. His brow furrowed as he reached for the Tiansong cloud sword from its scabbard, gripping it in his hand. He didn't need to know which one was Si Xiaonan's true form. He could simply activate Mortal Divine Domain, and the miracle would naturally guide the Tiansong cloud sword to strike Si Xiaonan's true form. With the sword that could cut through anything, Si Xiaonan would have no chance of escaping. But just as he raised the Tiansong cloud sword, Si Xiaonan's words flashed through his mind, and his hands stopped in midair. After a moment of silence, he sighed and lowered the sword. He chose to trust Si Xiaonan. Although he didn't know exactly what had happened, Si Xiaonan's mention of the green shore flower was meant to send him a signal. Si Xiaonan was still the same Si Xiaonan from Squad 136 in Tsongnan City years ago. Lin Jie stood at the broken entrance of the Elixir Palace, looking up at the sky. Above the jade pool, The Queen Mother of the West's golden-purple divine robes swayed gently in the wind. Holding the Kunlun mirror, she coldly looked down at the wounded Loki among the mountains. Then, as if sensing something, she turned to look in the direction Si Xiaonan had fled. Her brows immediately furrowed. Seeing that Si Xiaonan had succeeded, Loki's lips curled into a smile. He coughed up several mouthfuls of crimson blood as strange black light flickered around his body once more. The next moment, both Loki and the Queen Mother struck simultaneously, targeting Si Xiaonan in the distance. The Queen Mother extended her jade-like hand and made a grasping motion in the air toward Si Xiaonan. A mighty divine power swept forth. Si Xiaonan felt the spiritual energy around her suddenly churning as palm prints condensed from the void, covering the sunlight like a cyan sky. Looking up, Si Xiaonan saw a seemingly endless palm slowly curling. Under this giant hand, her figure was as insignificant as an ant, about to be crushed like one. At that moment she felt the world spinning, and when she came to her senses she had escaped from under the palm and was being held by her collar, suspended in midair by Loki. Loki's gaze swept over the 2 elixir bottles in Si Xiaonan's hand. His pale lips curved upward slightly, his eyes showing approval. Good. Take them back to Asgard. Loki's voice was extremely weak. He wove a trick in his palm that directly enveloped Si Xiaonan, and the next moment her figure vanished from Kunlun void. Seeing this, the Queen Mother's icy expression remained unchanged. Looking down at Loki, she said calmly, "Do you really think you can leave the borders of Great Xia?" Loki kept one hand behind his back, black light gathering at his fingertips, and sneered. "You're just a projection created by a divine artifact, so you probably can't leave this place, right? I admit I'm no match for you, but if I want to leave, there aren't many in this world who can stop me. If your true self were here, perhaps I really couldn't escape, but now, what gives you the right to stop me?" As his words fell, Loki's narrow eyes narrowed, a streak of black light flashed, and his figure vanished from Kunlun void. The Queen Mother stood calmly in the air, seemingly making no effort to stop him. After Loki had completely left Kunlun void, she merely glanced lightly at where he had been standing, then turned and took a step, appearing above the Elixir Palace in the next moment. Lin Chia stood at the entrance of the Elixir Palace. Seeing the Queen Mother approaching through the air, he raised both hands in a respectful salute. Mortal Lin Chia pays respects to the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother nodded slightly. Her gaze fell on the fallen maids in the hall and she sighed softly. "So be it. You've been through enough." With a slight lift of her fingertip, the 5 fallen maids' bodies began to glow with different divine lights, transforming into round jade beads that flew into the Queen Mother's palm and began to spin. At the same time, a green jade bead rapidly flew over from the distant celestial palace, joining the other 5. After spinning together briefly, they intertwined to form a 6-colored bead bracelet that gently settled on the Queen Mother's wrist. Seeing this, Lin Chia exclaimed in surprise. They weren't human? Merely pearl souls nurtured by magical treasures. The Queen Mother gently rubbed the jade beads with dulled luster and slowly continued. The jade pool has been abandoned for 100 years, and even the gods of Great Xia have entered reincarnation. Where would palace maids come from? For these 100 years, it has been these 6 pearl souls keeping company with me. Hearing this, Lin Chia was slightly stunned. 100 years? Queen Mother, did you not enter reincarnation 100 years ago? The Queen Mother extended her hand, pointing toward the celestial palace at the center of the jade pool. My true self naturally entered reincarnation. Only this projection, borrowing the power of the Kunlun mirror's time shadow, has remained in seclusion here. Then for these 100 years with only pearl souls for company, haven't you felt lonely? The Queen Mother shook her head slightly and replied with a smile. I usually spend my days forging knives and swords. When bored, I summon the shadow of the peach banquet to drink and discuss the Tao with the immortals. Living alone for 100 years hasn't been uninteresting. So the time shadow of the Kunlun mirror also has the wonderful use of passing time. Lin Chia couldn't help but marvel. The Queen Mother also forges knives and swords? Of course. The Queen Mother extended her hand, pointing to the cloak behind Lin Chia, and smiled slightly. The knives of your night watchers were forged by my own hands. Hearing this, Lin Chia froze in place. After a moment he came back to his senses, his mouth uncontrollably opening wide, his eyes filled with shock. The star knife was crafted by you? You've known about the Night Watchers all along. In Lin Chia's understanding, the Queen Mother living in seclusion in Kunlun Void and the Night Watchers should have been entities from two different worlds. He never imagined that the standard straight knife of the Night Watchers was actually forged by the Queen Mother from mythology. It was as absurd as if someone in modern society suddenly told you that the brand name clothes you're wearing were actually created by Chang'e flying down from the moon.